The $6 million question is, can anybody beat Mercedes? I know that everyone's sort of saying, well, yes, Ferrari's close, McLaren's close, Red Bull, Max is up there, whatever. But they've won every single race. Delucia, I'd be concerned if I was another team.
I also would be concerned given the margin as well, where they are compared to everybody else, and that winning gap is magnificent. I think if I were McLaren, Red Bull, Ferrari in particular, looking at those three teams, there's a lot of catching up to do. But at the same time, you have to give credit to Mercedes for absolutely nailing the changes to the regulations this year and how their drivers have been able really to maximize it because their expectations were there from the beginning. They said Mercedes was going to be the strongest, and they were correct. It was a matter of whether or not the drivers could execute that, and Kimi and George have been able to do that. I mean, Kimi, 4 in a row, it's incredible what he's been able to achieve. He's got now a 43-point gap to George Russell, and I think he's on such a great trajectory. But a big but here, it's Monaco this weekend. And Monaco is an incredibly unique track where qualifying is really what matters here. And I think if you look at the qualifying of someone like Lando Norris, who has put it on pole for the sprints before, he won last year. Can he do it again this year? We've got someone like Lewis Hamilton who really is on the up and up. He's got so much momentum behind him. Can he do something magnificent? I think the last time he won in Monaco was 2019, Sash. So, you never know with this kind of circuit, but I think this weekend, I'm hoping that it would be someone else to win because I have a feeling that things are not going to be as, hopefully speaking, that Mercedes are not going to be as dominant this weekend. I think that Ferrari and McLaren and Max Verstappen is definitely going to bring an edge to this weekend.
Okay, so there's a couple of things we've got to remember for this Grand Prix and going forward, which are vital. It is believed, don't forget, that Mercedes and this Mercedes power unit have been able to adapt the compression ratio within their engine under variable conditions. Now, the regulation stipulated that the compression ratio has got to be 16:1 at heated temperatures. Now, it is believed, or at cold temperatures, it is believed that Mercedes have been able to elevate that slightly higher when they're in racing trim or when that car is on the track. Now that car, all Mercedes units will be tested and they have to comply within the regulation that it has to be at 16:1 in terms of compression ratio at any time that it is tested. So there will be a slight adjustment to that Mercedes engine if all things are to believe. And we do believe that there is going to be a slight difference. At Monaco, is that going to make a big difference? I'm not entirely sure because Monaco, you don't really have the ability to really push those cars in terms of extreme speeds. However, it is a very, very tight circuit, very, very tricky. There's a lot of slow speed corners. Ferrari have been very good in slow speed corners, and so has McLaren. And then, of course, you've got the max factor as well. So we could well see something different. Leclerc has won there, Verstappen's won there, Norris has won there, Lewis has won there. I can't remember if George has won there. I don't think he has. There we go. So the two Mercs, of course, want to break the duck. And Monaco is, yes, it's special. I get so many people saying, why is Monaco still on the calendar? And I say, listen, Monaco is Monaco, for goodness sake. It's like not having the Indy 500 or Le Mans 24 hours. That is what Monaco is about. If you think it's a street procession, then you know what? Do yourself a favor. Don't watch it. But anything can happen. And when you're doing 78 laps under pressure, anything can happen. We saw a 53-second lead many, many years ago with Senna, and he put it in the wall just going into the tunnel and disappeared for 3 days. Winning Monaco is like you have arrived in Formula One.
It absolutely is. And I think, Senna's got the most wins there, 6 wins. That's an incredible feat that no one has yet to get there yet. And I think that if you look at the caliber of drivers we have now, I'm really excited to see if the Mercs can really put it, on top of the podium in Monaco because they've yet to do that and they haven't done that in a couple of years. The thing that's interesting for me is I am in a position where, we can watch this race and we can kind of see how things fare. But I think Monaco is one of those outliers in the calendar where you really don't know what's going to happen. And I think particularly with this year, the cars are smaller. And I think that this will allow, hopefully, for a bit more overtaking, because that's always been an issue where everyone has said, oh, the same 10 people who start in the top 10 will end in the top 10. Highly likely, yes. But for the first time since 2009, we are seeing a lot more narrower cars, a lot more smaller cars, which may allow for overtaking. It's not guaranteed. But it's so technical, this track, that if you just mess up in one corner, in the next one, you're probably going to be out. And I think also when we look at the reliability of the Mercedes, for example, George out with an engine failure. We saw, Lando also having, a DNF last time out. There also has been a lot of questions, as we mentioned before, Sash, about, how reliable are these power units of the Mercedes? Because it hasn't always been, all glitz and glam for them. Yes, they've won the last, 4 races in a row with Kimi and then with George as well. But at the same time, you really do have to question, can they handle a track like Monaco? It helps that there's not a lot of lifting and coasting, but at the same time, it is going to be really, really good to see if McLaren and Ferrari especially can capitalize on that.
Yeah, I think also the one thing to look forward to this weekend is even if the two Mercs are really, really super fast, they are going to push each other. And that's what eventually led to George Russell's mechanical failure, because you're just pushing that car to the extreme all of the time. So that, it's not as though we have the situation, and I hate to use Valtteri as an example, but we don't have a Lewis versus Valtteri where Valtteri knew that if Lewis is in front, just back off and hold up the pack. Kimi Antonelli is not going to wait for George Russell, and vice versa. But even if one of those Mercedes are in front, the likes of Leclerc, Hamilton, Hadjar, Verstappen, Norris, Piastri will be pushing them. So it's going to have its toll on the engines. They are not going to be able to hold back and control the race as easily as they think. Also, when it comes to overtaking in Monaco, most people always sit there and go, oh well, maybe down the main straight going into Saint Avold, maybe that's a opportunity. Cast your memory back to Max Verstappen, where I think he qualified 8th or 10th or 11th or something, and going down at Mirabeau, he overtook 3 or 4 cars. So there is potential, depends how brave you are. So, yes, but more than likely it is going to be a race of attrition, tire strategy. There more than likely will be safety cars. And the one thing I can guarantee you, there will be overtaking, Delucia, and that is that more than likely the Cadillacs and probably the Aston Martins will get overtaken in this Grand Prix. Unfortunately, just due to the nature that they are rubbish.
Honestly, and I'm glad you brought up Cadillac, because there have been rumors swirling for the last week about Bottas being replaced. And there has been a rumor going around saying that, halfway through the season, we're going to change and we're going to bring in our Formula 2 hopeful, an American driver, an American team, which is going to be Colton Herta. And he's someone that they are looking to develop. He is the reserve driver for the team. But my question is this. Out of all the results that we've seen so far of Cadillac, their highest finish, which was in China, was P13. Who was the person who got P13? Valtteri Bottas. So, I have a lot of questions regarding that replacement. I always feel like we've spoken about this in detail, where replacing a driver midway through a season, especially in this circumstances where he's got the experience, but the car just hasn't been functioning on the level of every other team, it's very difficult to make such a rash decision, where I thought when Cadillac had announced the drivers, it was a pretty logical decision, bringing in 2 veterans and trying to help the team build. And now all of a sudden it's like, well, he hasn't done enough, so we'll bring in someone else. And then on the flip side, we have rumors swirling around that Sergio Perez has been called up by multiple other teams looking for a change for next year. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, well, I can understand why the 2 of them would want to leave. The results really aren't there for them at all. But it's a very, very interesting debacle that's going on at the moment at Cadillac. So it might not just be a car structural issue, it might also be a lot of internal issues that's coming to the surface on track.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've got to look at it. Cadillac is General Motors, one of the biggest car companies in the world. It's not as though they need massive sponsorship somewhere along the line. And they've got to pay Perez and they've got to pay Bottas, big deal. Moving either one of them, moving Bottas out and bringing Colton Herta doesn't make any sense whatsoever in the fact that it's going to hurt Colton Herta's career going forward, because it's a dud car. It's not working properly at the moment. And I agree with you. Having Valteri and Sergio there, they're both very experienced. They can add value in sense of maybe this system, etc. So, stay with where they are. With the Perez scenario, and don't forget, Perez has got the tremendous backing of a gentleman by the name of Carlos Slim. So if Perez wants to go to Audi, he just goes, Mr. Slim, Audi have offered me a drive or whatever, but they need $50 million. Carlos Slim will say, okay, well, he has $50 million. Okay. Perez, of course, wants to go and race and he wants to go and win. Bottas is sitting there going towards the end of his career and he's not as hungry as I think Perez. Perez is still very, very hungry. Bottas is sitting and saying, let me ride this out there. Let me try and help Cadillac as much as possible. Stay with them for 2 or 3 years and then say goodbye to Formula One. Perez will be sitting and going, well, either Racing Bulls, he's had a long relationship with Red Bull, regardless of how acrimonious it was when he left. But all of the other teams know that you bring Perez, number one, you know that he's quick. And number two, you know there's going to bring you a handful of money. So that one probably I would believe more than the Bottas one. But I have been proven wrong many, many times in the world of Formula One. But I don't think Colton Herta going to Cadillac right now would be the wisest decision. He's only racing in Europe basically for the first time properly in Formula 2. He's getting better, but he's still got a long way to go when it comes to before he steps up to Formula One. And I'd love to see him get to Formula One, but probably not right now with Cadillac.
Not at all. And I think the fact that he also doesn't have enough points on his super license is pretty much a valid argument here, where you also have to give it time, because sometimes you can't rush these things. I mean, we saw what happened with Logan Sargent when they tried to rush bringing him in to Williams. It was disastrous for him, and he also ended up having to leave halfway through the season because of the dismal performance that he had put on into his second year. So I think that, in all honesty, they've got a good lineup. Like you said, the car is just a dud. So bringing in someone else is not going to change the results of anything. But I mean, if you compare it to Aston Martin, we're still waiting to see some improvements from them, because when they had asked Lance Stroll and Fernando Alonso when they think some improvements would happen in the team, both of them, it was almost like a radio silence. You know, when you give the diplomatic answer of, it will come, but we're not sure when. I have a feeling that they have no idea how to fix the issues at Aston Martin, which is really disappointing.
Yeah, it is. It's exceptionally disappointing. And I don't just believe it's a Honda issue. I don't just believe that it's a design issue. Somewhere along the line, they just haven't got the ability to fix things up. It hasn't helped that Adrian Newey has been ill, but Aston Martin are in a whole bunch of trouble. But another wonderful thing about this weekend is that for the first time in many, many, many years, we've got 11 teams. So we've got 22 cars around those very narrow streets of Monaco. Qualifying, as we know, is exceptionally difficult, even when you're on the track on your own. But now getting through traffic is going to be, so Q1 qualifying is going to be very, very difficult, in the sense that if the top guys are slightly out of sync of where they're meant to be on the track, could compromise them dearly. And we know that Monaco eventually is going to come down to a couple of hundredths of a second for pole position. But passing extra 2 cars on the track, or 2 cars getting in the way on the track on qualifying, that's something to definitely watch out for this coming Saturday as well.
And I find it quite interesting. Last year, we obviously had the implementation of a very unique rule to the Monaco circuit, which was you have to do mandatory 2 stops with 2 different tire choices, whether that's in the wet or dry weather. This year, we're not doing that. So there is no mandatory strategic ploys that the teams need to go on. I think last year didn't actually make a difference, to be fair, on the race result. because it was just we tried to do something to spice it up and it didn't work. I think this year it would just be interesting to see how things are going to play out. Also because I feel like they'll probably be a little bit faster here because they can go flat out in Monaco. Don't have to worry too much about the heavy braking zones and when to deploy battery. So I really think I'm just looking forward to the almost the purest form of racing coming to Monaco with all the glitz and the glam. I think we're really in for a treat.
Yeah, I think it's going to be exceptional. And that, yeah, that qualifying, of course, we know is so essential when it comes to Monaco. But there's also the aspect of, as you mentioned earlier, the cars are slightly narrower. And in Monaco, if you are in the front, it's just a question of trying to control it as much as you want to make your car as wide as possible. With this, it's going to be a question of actually who's the driver behind you and how brave are they to try and dive you. There are opportunities, maybe coming out of the tunnel, going into the Mirabeau, maybe going to Santa Vot. So there are opportunities, especially now with these narrow cars. And then, of course, a safety car. A safety car intervention all depends on where you are on the track. That could definitely change the sort of outcome of this Grand Prix. However, if you are in the front, you have just got to make sure that you have full concentration, because it's for you to lose. Changing tires, not necessarily a big problem around Monaco. More than likely, the guys will go in a one-stop, even if there's a safety car. At that point, there's no necessity that there's going to be this huge difference in the performance of the tire.
Yeah, absolutely. If I just cast my mind back to last year and Lando winning, that was his second win of the year last year. We had Leclerc in second and then we had Oscar in third. I remember how that race kind of unfolded. And if you even looked at how everyone fared, Esteban Ocon ended up in the top 10. Liam Lawson, Isaac Hadjar. It was such a good top 10. Both Williams drivers scoring points. And I'm really hoping that they can replicate that this time out. Except, I will say, I think Alpine this weekend have a very strong team. And I'm really hoping that both Franco and Gasly can get into the points this weekend. My biggest hope is for Esteban Ocon as well. He's dispelled any of the rumors that we've spoken about him being replaced. He has said that's not going to happen and this is all false. Everyone's just, trying to rile him up in the media. But he said that it's not going to happen, this being replaced. But there is still pressure on him to perform. He's done very well here in Monaco before. 2 years ago, we had a surprise podium for him. I'll never forget it because Charles Leclerc won that year as well. He's had a lot of success in Monaco. I'm hoping that that success will translate here because the Haas car isn't too bad. It's just a matter of where they're going to end up in qualifying. So if Esteban Ocon can do a really good lap and, hopefully earn some good points for the team, that would be great. But also all eyes on Arvid Lindblad. I would love to see him, in Monaco. It was so unfortunate how things ended for him last time out in Canada because he did so well in both the sprint and then obviously the Grand Prix. He had a gear issue. This time out, I think Racing Bulls have a really good chance of also scoring some good points. And to see Arvid Lindblad really take on Monaco, he would have had the experience already doing this race in Formula 2. But I would love to see him, battling out with the Verstappens of the world and McLarens and Ferraris and the Mercedes as well.
Yeah, the one thing about Arvid Lindblad that has really impressed me, seems to have a very calm demeanor. And Monaco, you need that. So a guy like Hadjar, who's a little bit more boisterous, you're saying, Isaac, get the lap in there afterwards, then go for it or whatever. Lindblad, I think, will be able to build. Guys like Bierman, guys like Ocon. And then, of course, I agree with you with Alpine. I think Alpine are going leaps and bounds. And now the fact that next year's car is going to have the Gucci livery, I think is just magnificent. So I'm very, very chuffed about that. And it's not because Gucci is Italian, but it's not owned by the Italians. But it's just, I love the colors. And I've always loved Gucci. So I think the Gucci Alpine it just fits Flavio Briatore. It fits Alpine. Oh, it's just stunning. And I think they are going to be very, very quick this weekend as well. Of course, they've got the Mercedes power behind them. And I think both of their drivers are exceptionally good around Monaco. So all in all, I don't think it's going to be that straightforward for the likes of Mercedes. But it is for all of the other teams to beat Mercedes.